What's up everybody, it's cosmoplaysgames here and welcome to this week's Humble Bundle review. This week we're looking at the Humble GameMaker Bundle. If you haven't heard of GameMaker, it literally is what it sounds like. It's a piece of software that lets you make games both via a sort of GUI interface or a sort of click and drag interface and a coding interface as well. It's fairly well used. It's been used to create games such as Spelunky, the original, before it was actually sort of redone in actual code. Hotline Miami, Nidhogg, Stealth Bastard, Deadbolt, and you should have heard of Undertale, which was out earlier this year, which did quite exceptionally well. So it's a quite clever and capable piece of software, able to make some pretty good games. Now this bundle actually contains both the software and a few games made with that software. So let's have a quick little look, and I'll sort of walk you through each individual thing here. And there we go. It took its time, but it finally disappeared. Straight away then, you get, for $1, you get GameMaker Studio Pro, which basically is the sort of the first sort of non-free version of the actual sort of the software. You basically the GameMaker software is free, but it has limitations, such as it can only be done on Windows, and it doesn't necessarily do things like splash screens, give you access to early access, and a few other bits and pieces that Pro actually does give you. So considering you're paying $1 for a piece of software that usually costs $149, that's a pretty good deal in my opinion anyway. And here, next up are a few games that actually been made with it. Uncanny Valley is actually $6.99 on Steam. It's a sort of a pixel art horror adventure game, sorry, where you basically play as a security guard called Tom, in charge of the night shift at a remote facility. And for some reason you decide to go and explore it, which of course in this sort of situation is quite a bad idea. Because he starts seeing things he really shouldn't. It's fairly good reviews, 73% overall, 67% on Metacritic. If you're into sort of adventure games and like the sort of pixel art sort of look and feel to things, you should enjoy this game fairly well, I think, based on what the reviews are saying. Cook Serve Delicious is next up, and it's a game that, well, depending on your where you sort of look, is something that's actually quite well received. You do get the Android version, or get the ability to download it to Android, but for this part I am looking mainly at Steam. It's $6.99 on Steam, or about $10. It's basically, as it sounds, it's a restaurant sort of simulation game where you basically have to manage your restaurant and serve food and drink to your customers as they sort of come in through the door, but also deal with things like when the trash or the trash and all that kind of stuff. So it's basically a like I said, a management game. It's got really good reviews, 94% recently, 95 overall. So it's a game that is extremely well received and has some very good reviews. So if you're into sort of management games, and I know I say it a lot, then it should be something that you enjoy. Ink has been in sort of other bundles, other bundles, or at least I think I got it from a monthly bundle or something. But it's basically a 2D sort of platformer where you basically sort of play a sort of sponge that basically leaks ink as you sort of jump on the walls, or as the enemy jump on the walls, and literally the whole level is invisible until you actually touch one of the surfaces, making it exceptionally difficult to sort of gauge where platforms are until the ink touches them. It's $3.99 on Steam, or about $5. It's well received. 100% of the reviews recently are good, which should tell you something. 85% overall on Steam, and 68% on Metacritic. So I think the general sort of the feeling I got from Metacritic is that it's a good game, but it's just a bit sort of limited in terms of how much you have to sort of do in the actual game. You sort of reach a certain point, but overall a nice little 2D platformer that is sort of very sort of reminiscent of things like Super Meat Boy and I forget what the other ones are called, but you get what I'm trying to say, I hope. Now The rest of this, you basically get, you do get 2 more games, but you also get some source code to be used in GameMaker for Extreme Burger Defense, Freeway and Freeway Mutant, as well as the source code and the game for Shepherd, which basically is sort of a game where you sort of have to protect your sheep from wolves and sort of shear them every so often and stuff. It's a bit, based on the video, that the trailer and everything, it's a bit of a sort of, it's a very simple sort of crazy looking game, but I think it looks quite good. And the fact that you get source code is pretty useful too, because you basically get to see how games were created, and you can utilize that source code to create your own, because then at least you can see how things like certain physics, certain game elements are created by this. It can also be a bad thing, because, you know, source code is not necessarily the best way of learning something, because you may get too used to doing things in a certain way, and when it comes to actually changing stuff, then that can cause issues. And that's just me from personal experience, but as a programmer and getting other people's source code, it's not necessarily always clear what is going on. Angry Chickens is an Android game, and it basically is a game where you have to sort of move from side to side and collect eggs. So make of it as you will. You know, I couldn't find a price for it on the Android store, but whether or not that's because it's free or not, I can't really say. But, you know, it's a game that is for mobile, definitely. Anyway, moving forward. So next up, we've got the HTML5 module for GameMaker. Now, basically, GameMaker has the ability to deploy on multiple platforms. I think I mentioned that earlier. And in this case, it does this via modules, which you have to pay extra for. So the $149 that you paid for the actual GameMaker Studio Pro doesn't give you the ability to deploy on certain platforms. And HTML5 means that you can basically run your game in a browser or anything that supports HTML5. So most mobile phones will support HTML5 to a certain degree, maybe not to the same way that, say, you'd write it if you wrote it for the actual phone itself, but it can actually utilize HTML5 to create them. It's the actual module, in this case, the HTML5 module is $199.99. So for $200 worth of actual sort of, I was about to say content. It's not really content. So it gives you the ability, let's put it that way, the ability to deploy HTML5. And it's not a bad actual sort of idea, because the HTML5 is less likely to change in the future, as I'll sort of explain with the problem with these modules down here. But at least this will sort of open up your game to being played on browsers if you so wish to do so. Anyway, next up, game wise, we've got a game called Home. Now, Home is $1.99 on Steam, or about $3, and it's basically another pixel art horror adventure game. But the difference here is you basically take part in a murder mystery with a twist, which is basically that you decide what happens. Now, basically you make decisions as you go play the game, and it changes certain aspects of the game towards the end. Now, that sounds pretty nifty, except when you play it through multiple times, you find that it's not necessarily as well, it is quite straightforward, but it's also a bit too straightforward, in that the game basically has sort of a tense atmosphere. It gives you the whole sort of horror-esque game, horror-esque sort of, you feel like you're not playing a horror game, but there's nothing out there that really hurts you, and you end up sort of playing the same thing over and over again, which essentially gives you slightly different outcomes at the end, you know, and you get to sort of decide what happens at the very end, rather than sort of what happens during the entire game. That said, it's, you know, it's not too bad. You know, the reviews are pretty average, and that's kind of why the kind of fairly average is that people sort of play the game and find out that it's not necessarily as open as they'd like. So 54 recent, 69% overall, and 69 Metacritic. So those are the general sort of feelings of the people who have reviewed the game. Next up then is Solstice. It's $14.99 on Steam, and it's basically a sort of a visual novel fantasy adventure game where you take part in the mystery involving the city that you're staying in, which is Solstice. And there's a sort of you sort of try and find out what's going on in the city and investigate the people around it. It's trying to find out what's going on within it. I can't really say much more than that because it was very sort of it was trying to avoid telling me too much about the story, and that's kind of a good thing. But review wise, it's done really well. It's 100% overall, and this is a game that was released 6 months ago, so the people that have played it have loved it. The visual style looks pretty impressive, I have to say. So overall, although visual novels are not really my sort of cup of tea, it definitely looks like a game that would be quite impressive to play. Let's put it that way. Okay, so that's probably the best I can sort of say in terms of things. Now the rest of the sort of the rest of the games in this tier are basically well, one of them is an Android game which looks like sort of Missile Defender, but more recent, shall we say. And you get the source code for that game as well. You also get the source code for Uncanny Valley, Inc., 10 Second Ninja X, and Cook Serve Delicious. So you basically get the source code for the games that are in the previous tier, as well as a game that's also in a sort of a tier further down. I'll show you that one in just a minute. Now moving on to the blue tier then, finally. This is getting a bit sort of convoluted. $15 gets you basically the whole bundle and these sort of extra bits. Now, as I was talking about the modules, these give you 3 modules, which the first 2 are priced at $299.99, which is an exceptionally large amount of money, and basically gives you the ability to deploy your game on Android and iOS. Now, I mentioned about the possibility of versions or problems with versions, and one thing that is not made exceptionally clear is what happens if the version of Android or the version of iOS changes. The thing about modules like this is that they can sort of say, oh yes, we support up to a certain version of Android or a version of iOS, and then they change it and say, right, you need to pay again or upgrade your module in order to support the next version of iOS. Now, if memory serves, a new version of iOS is coming quite soon. I think it's version 10 off the top of my head, but the question is whether or not this module will support it, and whether or not you have to pay to sort of upgrade it. I can't really say. It's a bit sort of difficult to sort of be clear on it. I couldn't find much information on the website, but in general it sounds like that this module will basically give you the ability to put your game on pretty much any major mobile device. Now, it does also include the Windows UWP module. Now, that one would assume that means both the phone and potentially the Xbox and a computer and a computer running Windows 10. So if you have Windows 10, you'll know that you can go to the Windows Store and basically play any sort of Windows app game in Windows 10. So, you know, my kids were quite impressed when they can play Minion Rush, for instance, on my computer, but not so impressed when they realized they couldn't touch the screen to make it move. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but basically this gives you access to pretty much the most major mobile brands. So it's quite an important sort of aspect, especially if you're making a fairly sort of casual game, because getting your game onto mobile platforms will open it up to a wide audience. Now, I can't give you a price for the Windows sort of module because that's only included in sort of the master edition of GameMaker, which is actually about $800. So overall, you're getting a lot of stuff for a good price. $15 is nothing compared to how much it's potentially worth. But obviously, you have to actually use those modules, and also be aware that those modules might become out of date depending on their point of view. Now, you also get 3 extra things. You get the source code for the two games, Home and Solstice, in the previous tier, and you also get Flop Rocket, which is a sort of side-scrolling space shooting game. But the fact you also get the source code and the UWP package is also pretty impressive too. So, well, there you go. It's sort of like halfway between sort of Lando and it looks yeah. It's gonna be one of those games, isn't it, when you sort of get very annoyed and irate and everything. But anyway, so overall, it's a nice bundle in terms of what you're getting. Now, the games that you also mentioned earlier, these ones that you get source code for, the Ninja X and the Extreme Burger Defense and Freeway Mutant, you get for free if you actually sign up there. And then I've just realized my email address is in that one, so now I'm gonna have to edit this video. Damn you, form remembering system. Anyway, basically you can get these games for free. Just pop your email address in the box down there and you will get them pretty much in the same way as you would any other game in the Humble Bundle. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is pretty much it in terms of the bundle. Now, what do I think of this bundle? Well, and that's not supposed to be over there. In terms of this bundle, I am quite impressed with how much you're getting for how little you have to pay. In terms of games, it's not necessarily a good bundle in terms of, you know, you're getting lots of games to play with. You're basically getting a lot of code, and a lot of sort of resources to play with. So it's nice in that sort of sense. But overall, I think the bundle deserves a fairly good 7 out of 10. The games are quite nice, quite well received, and considering what GameMaker is capable of, you're getting access to, like I said, a very good resource in terms of game making. But it's only really going to be good if you are interested in actually making the games. Now, obviously, if you want some of the games like Cook Serve Delicious for $1, that's a pretty good way of getting that kind of game. But the rest of it, you kind of sort of have to think, well, am I going to actually use it? Am I actually going to do game making? So in general, I say it's a good bundle, but it's got this sort of edge to it that means you have to sort of be interested in game making. So it's a difficult one to say, you know. I forgot to say it does come with a voucher for 40% off Ninja X, the newer version, shall we say, the non-GameMaker version. Now, you might be saying, well, what's the difference? Well, GameMaker is good, but the problem with GameMaker sort of software is that it kind of isn't necessarily as performance. I just realized I left that there. Isn't necessarily as performance-wise. It isn't necessarily as good as, say, if you actually coded it straightforwardly. So, generally speaking, it's good. It's a good bundle, but you need to sort of be aware of that, shall we say. Alright, I'm gonna stop talking because I've waffled too much. That's it for me, guys. Thank you for watching my video. Like and subscribe for more stuff. I'm now gonna go away and try and edit out my email address from this video. I should have remembered to log out. As always, comment, let me know what you think of this video, and I will see you next week for hopefully another Humble Bundle. I've been Cosmo the Coder, and as always, guys, happy gaming.